Welcome back, Ghana 4 on the AM show. Time now for me to share with you my blunt thoughts. This morning, I've titled it The Akufo Addo Experiment and Our Economic Journey So Far. Crucial Takeaways. In this past week, we've been hit with startling news about the former Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, Charles Edouboahin, and some sums of money he took for shopping and all of that. Apart from everything else we know, I find it curious what he says about attendance fees and some $200,000 that would supposedly suffice in getting the attention of our vice president, together with some considerations for his family for business purposes. Now, in the latest documentary put together by ANAS, the vice president and the president's names pop up again. Is the fact that the VP and the president's names have twice been tied to shady dealings proof that they are in fact culpable? No. Yet it is incredibly worrying that on two occasions with a former GFA boss and now a Minister of Finance, the two highest offices of our land have been pointed to in very distasteful terms. In number 12, Kwesi Nyantakyi suggested he could negotiate the monetary terms with our president and vice president. This time round, it is a Minister of State saying so. Just how much should we believe? Should we take all of this with a pinch of salt? You decide. But brothers and sisters, in Matthew 7, 1-5, we read the following. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Why do I say all this? In 2016, our current president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo Addo, came to our very doorsteps in all humility, pleading with us to give him a chance, to try him too. We bought into his message, and in fact took a chance on him. 6 years down the line, however, what have we got in return? Some positives, yes, and misery galore, a tragic cocktail. But this wasn't what we were promised. A typical example is when sometime in 2016, now Vice President Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia told us that the NDC administration since 2009 had borrowed some 40 billion American dollars. And that sum of money could have built for us 1,142 factories. Well, having borrowed some $53.2 billion as of July 2022, that could have built us some 1,513 factories. After 6 years, and with a clear policy on 1D, 1F, and with more borrowing, what do we have to show in that regard? Your administration has borrowed how many more factories? So much more, but how many more factories could you have built with your solid team? Would you mind telling us, Mr. Vice President? Or is it like an animal farm, 4 legs good and 2 legs bad? Well, the 2-legged chickens surely have come home to roost. On the back of the very things you said, Dr. Vice President. Your own words must be giving you nightmares, but hey, you'll have to live with them. Where are those factories? If we had them, we obviously wouldn't be in the dire straits we find ourselves saddled with currently. By this time last week, we knew inflation had shot up in October to 40.4%, and that year-on-year diesel had soared in price by 155.6%, and petrol by 111.9%. The palm oil or red oil we use for many of our meals had increased in price by a whopping 105.9%. Even the water we drink had experienced inflation of up to 64.3%. Diesel may have dropped in price by some 3 Ghana cedis from a staggering 23.99 Ghana cedis, and petrol by about 2 Ghana cedis from a mind-bending 18 cedis and 99 pesos. But LPG prices are still going up, and the agenda to stem the tide of using charcoal, which has its own consequences to our health and the destruction of our environment, is up in the air. Just yesterday, I had to patiently listen to the lamentations of a woman who had filled her gas cylinder with, guess what, over 400 Ghana cedis. And this is just for domestic purposes. Imagine then what business people who use gas are going through. Look, some marginal positive change has been brought to bear on the fuel prices, all well and good. But it is clear we need a whole lot more done to cushion the ordinary Ghanaian. Again, in the midst of all these price hikes, which by the way do not necessarily change even when fuel prices drop and exchange rates are better, how can we peg the minimum wage as it is now from 13.53 Ghana cedis to 14.88 from January next year? Look at inflation and fuel prices alone. How? In the meantime, let's calculate price hikes in fuel, transportation, rent, food, prices, water, and all of that. How about fluctuations in the exchange rate and still rising general inflation, neither of which we have been able to curb? A bag of cement alone is selling at a whopping 100 Ghana cedis. In fact, my checks reveal for most ordinary workers, transportation is well over 500 Ghana cedis per month. So how is this, by any stretch of imagination, logical in mitigating the unbridled suffering of the street sweeper who earns a pittance? The one working at one of these foreign malls and barely earning around saying, how? This also is why the e-levy rate ought to be revised downward, maybe below 1% in the next budget. So the pressure is eased on those transacting. And so more people can come on board and not get, around the system. The result? Definitely more funds in the state's kitty. Now, as we speak, Mr. President, per the Wisconsin newspaper, which we read just this morning, our young female students in university are selling their eggs for money in Accra and Kumasi. That, Mr. President, is how bad things have become. An importer recently shared this. Just 3 months ago, I was bringing 50 tons of rice by articulator load at 14,000 Ghana cedis. Today, I am paying 60,000 Ghana cedis. Mr. President, before I end, I just want to pause here, go to my slides, and wrap as I share my message with you. When you look at what we have here, what the minority is accusing the finance minister of, from 2018, saying that the finance minister reported a fiscal deficit of 3.9% and excluded expenditure line items worth 9.8 billion for the finance sector payments. This is also captured here. It goes beyond the 5% we look at. Then, according to the minority again, the minister said the fiscal deficit was 4.8%, excluding the 3.1 billion financial sector payments and the 5.1 billion energy sector payments. When you look at Section 2 of our fiscal responsibility rules, it states, the overall fiscal balance on cash basis for a particular year shall not exceed a deficit of 5% of the GDP for that year, and an annual positive primary balance shall be maintained. Have we got that? Section 4 says, Parliament may, in accordance with Article 82 of the Constitution, pass a vote of censure on the minister where the minister breaches Section 2 by more than 1 percentage point. And again, going back to the public financial management, you would notice that the fiscal rules could be further strengthened, about 2.8 percentage points of GDP in financial and energy sector costs, that is financing in part through the ESLA bond and all of that. The question is whether we've taken advantage of all of these. Again, it mentions that according to best international practice, this would include these transactions above the line as they reflect either direct government obligations or government transfers to SOEs. But when you look at our risk assessment matrix, RAM for short, and you look at the nature or sources of our risk, it's usually politically driven fiscal loosening in the run-up to the 2020 elections that could translate into weak revenue collections, tax forbearance, and spending. And look at the relative likelihoods. It is high in terms of election periods in the past, which have coincided with large fiscal slippages. Then you look at the expected impact if realized. A strong political cycle could lead to higher deficits and debt, undermine budgetary integrity, and again, associated loss of confidence could trigger pressures on the exchange rate and reserves. And the policies to mitigate the risks, rigorously applying fiscal rules, recording all fiscal financing operations in line with the PFM Act and regulations, and including debt from off-budget operations in government's debt. But quickly taking a look at the minimum wage. Look at how things have escalated over the years, Ghana 4. Our minimum wage is marked with the cyan coloring. The poverty line is right here. In 2012, our minimum wage was quite a number of percentage points above the poverty line. In 2015, they came together. There was a merge. But since that time, it's been pretty close. And now look at where we are. The minimum wage has fallen for the first time in over 10 years below the poverty line, which also means that if you are earning the minimum wage, look at that, even purchasing a loaf of bread would be problematic. Again, in terms of the percentage changes yearly, look at where we've gone from 2013. Look at how the minimum wage in terms of percentage has slipped from 16.9 in 2013 to 10 now, even on the back of everything we're facing. Just to wrap with some talk about the e-levy. When you look at its description and our estimates, we're looking at 6.96 billion. We revised that figure to 4.5 billion. Then when it came to Q2 budget. Look at our expectations there. And now look at the accruals. Provisionally, in the first time, we got 93.7 million, which was just about 6.4%. If you look at our month-on-month targets for May and June, we estimated to get 487.4 million. We got only 39.4 million. That was 8.08%. In June, the estimate was 417. We got 54.3 million, an upward trajectory. And the estimate there was 12.99%. But that tells you something definitely. That if we lessened the figure, we probably would be able to get much more in terms of the e-levy. So, Mr. President, I am re-echoing for you what I said last week. Fix the country. Fix the country, Mr. President, and cease with the plenty talk. That was what you told former President Mills. It was what you said to former President Mahama. No country was ever built on talk, Mr. President. For guess what? Talk is dirt cheap. If you have anything good to offer the people of Ghana who trusted you enough to give you their mandate, a chance to fulfill your lifelong dream of becoming president, it is now. And that is why, Mr. President, I wish you well. But always remember, posterity will judge you for your actions and inactions today. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. These are my blunt thoughts shared with you, raw, hot, unedited, and undiluted. As always, God richly bless Ghana and make her great and strong.